40 years, and
Wow.
I worked with him. And he said, I always have thoughts, lots of thoughts, all the time. I'm always thinking. But this is so different. It's transmitted in an energy form through thought, unlike any of my regular thoughts. Now, some people see them too. I mean, or they can feel them. They feel them on the right side of them, the left side. They feel them in the room. There's all different ways they do experience it. But that's what he said, and they do seem to be coming in an energy form, Roberta. It's some form of energy.
But I have talked to people, it's been a while now, but I have talked to people who have been through this process with you, and some of them talked about having real experiences. I remember one woman, she was on a beach, and she got a hug, and her I think it was her daughter, was right there. Yes, so some of them do get into it to that extent, right?
Absolutely, and she was touching her daughter's hair. Her daughter came walking toward her. Her daughter had been killed in a auto accident and died instantly, and her mom wasn't there when it happened, and she just felt terrible that she wasn't there. But no, that her daughter was like 18 or 19, and she came to her in the processing part, and she let her mother touched her hair, stroked her hair, put her arm around her, hugged her, and then her daughter took her down this path that was it had rock on each side of it, and then it was like a cobblestone path, beautiful flowers and things. So yes, they do. They can see. It just depends on, but at the minimum, their sadness is greatly reduced, and they do feel very different, because when you're carrying trauma around in the body, it is in our body.
Yes.
And when we do this work, it releases it out of their body. So when they finish, they say, "Oh, I feel lighter. I feel better."
It's extraordinary. That woman was the most memorable one I talked to. This was, I think, a couple of years ago when you had several people there at the conference. But everybody had some experience. And for many of them, it was physical, but not to that extent. I mean, she had a whole saga to tell. But what percentage feel that they had some real sort of physical feeling about what was happening? And what percentage it's just energy, but they're still sure it's their loved one?
Oh, well, 98% when I do it. Yes. 98%.
98% have had the experience, but do you know what percentage, or do you have any sense? Is it rare?
No, I'm saying that during the ones that I do, Roberta, they do experience at 98%.
Well, that's wonderful. It's
yes.
In whatever way that spirit wants to connect with them, they do experience it, and they know they have had that connection.
Yes, they do, because they call them by a name that no one else knew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all sorts of different things. Like, so I have some things that I wanted to tell you. They show hospital scenes and other scenes, and they show, like they were in pain, which we on this side think, oh, they were in so much pain. They show that they weren't. They show how they left their body, and they're looking down on what's happened. That's a lot of time when they've been in the hospital. And and they show up younger, in their prime. They're healthy. Their animals come sometimes.
Yes.
There was a three-legged dog when he died. He was running on the beach in the session. He had 4 legs, and he was with 6 other dogs running on the beach.
Of course, because and anyone who is thinking about animals dying, just know every animal you have loved is there, whole now and healthy, and that's another excellent example of how we know that to be true. But it is true. It's wonderful. So everybody I talked to had the same tale to tell. They didn't talk about what had happened in it so much as they knew they had had an immediate, intense connection with someone that they loved that was not in a body. They knew that person was fine. Everything was good between them. If there had been issues in the past, one woman had some kind of issue with her husband, and I don't remember I remember very little about it, except that she said, "We're tight now. We're okay now." And
yes,
they would say things like, I would say, "Well, how can you give us a scale 1 to 10? How much grief have you had? Or were you experiencing?" And they would say 11. They were just in an uncontrollable grief. But then afterwards, well, it depends on the day. It's a 1 or a 2. I mean, I still, love him or her and miss him or her, but I know that they're fine, and I know that if I need to have a connection, I can, and that's all I need in this lifetime. And to me, that is so what I hear from people every day who are in grief. And to know that there's a way to address it is just extraordinary. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. And like I said prior, that I do screen people. I screen them for previous trauma because sometimes that will come up because the brain wants to clear that before it can go to where it needs to go, or spirit wants to clear it. And so I do screen them, but they come they're here for 5.5 hours, and it takes that long. But it's very different by the time they leave, it's very uplifting for me to do the work.
I'm sure it is. Wow.
Say what you love, what you do. It's not like work, and that's the way it is for me because I truly love it. I think that you just a little bit earlier in the show you were talking about Carol, who her daughter. She was able to stroke her hair and hug her and so forth. Right. Well, I do have this sound. She also saw that she rose up from the crash and left her body, and she was sitting on the hood of the car smiling and showing her mother. Yeah, showing her mother. I left my. Yeah, and showing her mother, I left my body. I didn't have pain. And she was dressed in this flowing white dress, but her feet weren't showing. It's so funny. Like she didn't have feet, like she was floating. And she said, "Mom, I'm okay." And so it's not like we imagined. That's what's interesting.
Yes. Please know that if you have a loved one who died in a car crash or in something else that was very traumatic, they're out of their bodies before it happens. Many of you know who Mikey Morgan is, and in his book, Flying High in Spirit, he talks about his death. He says suddenly he was above the car looking down as it crashed, and there was his body, and everybody else was fine. It's just that, of course, he died in the crash. It was a planned death, but he wasn't even in his body when it happened. And we have heard from many other people over the years who were speaking through mediums or in some other way to their living loved ones who said that, don't worry, I wasn't even in my body. One guy talked about how amazing it was. He'd gone right through the roof, and it was a solid roof. At least Mikey talked about it. There was an open sunroof. Nope, he went right through the roof. What happens is if it's going to be an event that ends our lives, we don't stay in the body to experience that death. And there's this lovely young woman smiling, sitting on the hood of the car. And a couple of things that the mother said that were strange to her. One was that she didn't seem to have feet. One of the things that people who see apparitions of their dead loved ones tell us over and over again is sometimes they see it only down as far as the chest. It looks like a bust. Sometimes they see most of the body. Very seldom do they see feet. We don't know why that's true. Maybe because there's no need for feet, so why bother to show feet? I don't know why. But that's another sign that what this woman experienced with her daughter is universal. This is what happens. And she was wearing white. Well, in the afterlife, they call these garments spirit robes. When you leave your body, it's not clothed. You sort of come into the afterlife the same way you came into the body, this life, with a body that is just not clothed. But our minds almost immediately clothe us, and sometimes they clothe us in clothing that we are familiar with from this life. But in her case, those were spirit robes that she was wearing. They're generally white or they're a pale pastel, and so hearing that makes me even more certain, although I was before, that these are real communications. Because Rochelle didn't know anything about that, neither did the mother. Only people who would do a lot of study understand these details. So well done, Rochelle. That was really, really fun to talk about.
Well, yes, and I would like to reiterate with you that a lot of times on the other side, people are dressed in white. They might have, one had a white karate suit on, one was just in beautiful white robes, white dresses, a white T-shirt. It's kind of amazing to me that, I've made special note of it, that there are so many in white. Well, of course, not all of them, or not the majority, but there's enough to really make note that they are dressed in white.
I think that would be because we clothe ourselves. We decide what to wear. And people there are naturally attuned to spirit and naturally aspiring to grow ever more spiritually. Whatever craving you have in your life, I don't care what it's for, take all of those cravings, wrap them up together, sex, chocolate, and rock and roll. Wrap it all up and imagine it multiplied by 1,000. That's how much, when you are in the afterlife, and I'm speaking to everybody now, that's how much you're going to crave spiritual growth. You don't know it here, but believe me, you'll know it there. And so one sign of that is that we tend to wear light colors or white. Some people figure they're not ready to wear white, so they wear a pastel. But that's why the spirit robes are colored as they do. Good points, dear. That's wonderful. Now, you told me during the break there was something you wanted to make sure that you got to mention, that something that had happened fairly recently, I guess?
Yes, it happened about a month ago, and I got an email from someone back east, and she said while I was having a reading, and she was having a reading with, I would say, one of the top mediums.
Yes.
I would say
it's okay. You could say who it was.
Yeah, Suzanne Giesman.
Yes.
And she said when I was having a reading with her, I was referred from the other side to you. And I'm like,
I love
it. I'm like, what? So I said, well, call me and we'll talk about it. And so I asked her. Well, she did come out last week and saw me, and I did ask her about it. I said, how did that go? And she said, well, we were in the middle of the reading, and what came across was Suzanne said to her, you need to see, I believe she said you need to see Rochelle in Washington State or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but enough that Suzanne knew what came across. And then later in the reading, they came across again to see Rochelle.
Oh,
and so
wow.
By that time, Suzanne said, look, I'm going to look it all up for you. I'm going to give you her email, her phone number, and how to contact her, which was wonderful. And I appreciate Suzanne for doing that. And so that's how, the other side connected her with me. And I had it happen in about 2011. There was a therapist from Texas, and this is when I was first doing it, and she called me at 5:30 a.m. my time and woke me up. And
oh dear!
In the morning.
Yes.
Yeah,
2 hours difference. Yes.
And she was all excited that she had this reading, and it was having a reading with her nephew who passed, and he said, in this reading, he told her, you need to be trained by the person who does those eye movements. And he didn't give her a name. He said something like maybe Washington State. And she was just like, well, how am I going to find somebody like that? He said, those eye things. But she did. She went on the internet, and somehow she found me and was so excited she could hardly contain herself and called me at 5:30 in the morning.
Right. 7:30 in Texas, so it wasn't too early in Texas.
No, and then I got it. She was so excited. It was hard to decipher what she was saying.
Oh,
and but she wanted the training, so she came and she got the training. So it's very interesting, Roberta. In those two cases, the other side referred those people to me in a reading.
And I just want to emphasize the fact that here is Rochelle being a servant. These people are all desperate. the people who are no longer in bodies, almost to a person that we have heard from lately. They're desperate to have us understand the truth. And so many people now are beginning to tell their loved ones to find someone who can help them really come to understand